All right, fellow fact checkers, we've got a brand new sponsor, and I am excited to promote this product. It's Fox & Sons Coffee. Now, Fox & Sons Coffee is a family-owned and operated small business selling whole bean, organically roasted, amazingly good coffee. On their website, Steve, the company's founder, describes how his love of coffee started with special Saturdays with his dad when he was growing up. Steve wants to share his love of coffee with you and the entrepreneurial spirit with his sons. Check out the website, foxinsons.com. and take a look at their best offer, a monthly subscription for 3 bags of coffee with free shipping for $38.89. Also, Steve's been on the show. He's a friend of the show. He follows us on the morning after as well as here on Fact Check This Podcast. Steve is a great dude, great company to support. So go check out Fox & Sons Coffee and get your morning started off right with a bag of delicious Fox & Sons coffee. Let's start the show. All right, Fact Check This Podcast, and it's time for round 2 of Blake Masters. Got Jason back with me, and this time I've got Tommy from Year Zero. And there is an off chance that Matt will be rejoining us. That's to be determined, but there's still a shot that Matt will be with us as well tonight. Tommy has not been on my show before. I've been on your show, but regrettably, I haven't had you on mine. So, Tommy, go ahead and introduce yourself and tell people where they can find you and all the stuff you got going on, and then we'll let Jason redo his spiel, and we'll take off with the conversation.
Oh, I can't believe I haven't been on your show before. Like, as much as we've talked, like I'm just like, are you sure? It seems like I've been here before. Yeah, Tommy Salmons. I'm the host of Year Zero at the Libertarian Institute. So you go libertarianinstitute.org/year-0/ and that's where you'll find all the podcasts. And then I have a Substack, TommySalmons.com. Thanks to a great listener for buying that for me, because I never would have thought about doing that. And that's pretty much all I do, other than drive a truck. I was the original truck driving podcaster. So up yours, Reed, up yours. But
Jason?
My name is Jason Marinchuk. I'm the co-host, creator, blah, blah, blah of 2-Bit Podcast. We do a weekly show every Tuesday at around 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with my co-host, Mark, where it's 2 old friends talking about things and stuff. We've now started doing intermittent little 15-minute shorts. They'll just pop up on YouTube. We're basically on YouTube. We're on other places too, but mostly on YouTube. Because, why not? Why not build something that will be destroyed by the flick of a finger? It's fun. It's like playing with fire. Other than that, we also have Friend or Fed, an ongoing series, which is Roundtable, which pisses off pretty much everybody, which is fun. And that's where we're at. I'm a Canadian living in Australia, so time zones are a constant hassle and a bitch. Other than that, I'm happy to be here.
I live right on the Eastern and Central time zone. We technically live in Eastern time by like a mile and a half, but then we both work in Central time. So I just live in Central time all the time, but my wife for some reason lives in Eastern time. So when I told her that we were doing a show tonight at 7, she said, it's already 7. I said, no, 7 my time. She's like, our time is the same time. We both live in the same house. I said, yeah, but you live on the wrong. You live in the wrong time zone. So.
Yeah, I live in constant doubt because with Mark, he's in Eastern Standard Time. I'm 12 hours ahead of Eastern Standard Time, but I'm 13 hours ahead of Central. And what? Let's just get to the conversation. Let's not do math. But it's just like I'm in a constant state of like time dread. Before any of these things, I'm like, is this the right time? I don't know. Like, I have to go check the graph and do like moon cycles and shit. Just make sure I'm not like late. But yeah,
it was the worst thing about driving over the road was trying to keep up with time zones. But he's like, you got to deliver it 7 a.m. Eastern time, and everything you have is scheduled on Central. So you get there at an hour late, and you're like.
I'm an hour early, according to my watch.
Yeah.
All right, so we are doing a follow-up on Blake Masters. Last time we had talked about the Salon and New York Times hit pieces that have been run on Masters. The more I look at those and read them, even since we've had that conversation, the more they just convince me that Masters is like a good, solid candidate. But it's also fitting, and I think we should point out for the handful who actually keep up with libertarian bullshittery, we had planned and scheduled this conversation well before Dave Smith came out and said that he supports Blake Masters. So for some context and background on that, there is a candidate in Arizona who is running against Masters, and apparently he's a good dude, but somehow he ended up on a debate stage talking about age of consent laws. And of course, because
that guy,
no good libertarian candidate can avoid talking about that conversation or talking about that topic. And so anyway, he brings up age of consent laws, and Dave Smith said, like, this is not good. Don't do this. That's not the way. And then that turned into a big firestorm. And he also said that he supports Blake Masters. So here it is. I support Masters. Also, let's not pretend Republicans don't have a lot of work to do. And this was in response to somebody was making a criticism of the Mises Caucus because Dave Smith had criticized this guy.
Right,
yeah. So we're all on the same page with this.
Play it.
Yeah,
Play it. It's horrible. Play it.
God. All right.
I'm just wondering if this Will Chamberlain
for example, who should represent the good people of the state of Arizona. That should be up for a vote. What should the age of consent be? This is something that reasonable minds disagree on. That should be up for a vote. Be up for.
Oh.
I know some reasonable parents that will shoot you.
Yeah. Why did they always have to bring up age of consent?
I'm just wondering if this Will Chamberlain guy is really concerned about age of consent laws because he's ran out of women of age to fuck.
Well, it's always those things, right?
Will the still,
It's always it's like when you hear about someone a guy coming out as a male feminist, and you're like, there's a countdown.
Justin, I think you're being shot at.
No, that's me.
Oh,
there's doors in the house.
Well,
Justin, duck.
He's the only one that lives anywhere that guns are allowed other than me.
This is true. It's like the countdown when you hear someone come out as a male feminist. Like there's a countdown until you get the sexual assault allegations coming out of the woodwork. Same thing. Like when anyone starts talking about anything about age of consent, you're like, oh, okay, so you've diddled kids. Like we're just waiting until we find out that you've diddled kids.
So the politician, I can't remember what his name is off the top of my head. Apparently he's a lawyer in Arizona, and he has represented people who lost their jobs because of COVID, and he's done some really good work on the legal side of things, and he is a very good dude, but then at the same time he's running for Senate, and Mark something or other. He's running for Senate, and of course he gets on the debate stage and brings up the damn age of consent shit and does the cringy libertarian thing. So Tho was very Tho Bishop defended him, but also was like, yeah, this is terrible. Why do libertarians have to insist on doing this whenever they get on a stage? It's like whenever they make the argument that that the debates are unfair because they don't let the libertarians on the stage. It's like they're doing you a favor. They just take the win. Don't get on the stage and fuck it up any more than.
Well, I made a comment in the Discord because this came up in my Discord today. This conversation, and I said the tone deafness of arguing age of consent is why no one takes the LP seriously. The least they could do after their takeover is to weed out the fucktards that can't read a room. Right? Well, we don't live in a period where age of consent is in the question. Actually, what's in question at this point in time is what is the appropriate age to start talking to children about sex without their parents' knowledge, right? And so I don't think age of consent is where we should be focusing our time. We maybe should be focusing our time on saying, hey, pedo teachers can't talk to 5-year-olds about sex. How about that?
Yeah. I mean, this is like throwing.
No, you don't.
What the good thing about all this, though, is that you can't. Then you're not going to say that the libertarians are stealing the votes from the Republicans in this one, because it's like, well, this gives Masters a pretty easy go. Like, Masters can get on the stage and go, "What the fuck are you talking about?" Like look at my platform, which is
and as Dave said
against all of that.
As Dave said in his tweet, like, this guy didn't have Mises backing. He went outside of the party to get his signatures to get on the ballot and stuff like that. So like he's kind of doing his own thing.
Then what good is the Mises caucus? Like what good is it then?
Well, I mean, that's like Hector Trey making his comment that Hector should debate DeSantis. My whole argument was,
I mean, I don't have any desire to watch a murder in real time. So no, please, let's not do that.
Personally, I don't think Hector and his supporters did all that good against me and Magoo when we debated them on whether or not he should run. Like, if you can't stand up against a couple redneck midwits, like, you definitely aren't going to stand a chance on a debate stage with.
I tried to watch that, dude. I did. I tried. I was just like, this guy. The problem is here's the problem that the Libertarian Party faces, and I have nothing against the Libertarian Party. I mean, like, Scott Horton's one of my best friends in the world, and he's all about like supporting these guys, right? The problem is that, like I said, they're tone deaf. Like they're not gatekeeping. They're not making sure that the candidates that are being run have some awareness as to how to communicate with the audience, right? I mean, if you had, let's say, just for instance, you had like Tom Woods running for Senate in Arizona, you'd never hear no stupid shit like that. He would draw a line and say, okay, I agree with Masters on all this stuff, but I disagree with him on this stuff. And then you could have a debate about those things. And the people that really understand how to present arguments would do things that way. But the people that end up running for office in the Libertarian Party, it's like they attract people that either don't want power, or the people that do want power are total idiots and say some of the most absurd shit. And it's like, y'all need to start gatekeeping better in like electing those that don't want the power, right? You want to get the Ron Paul types up there that can make the arguments, and they're ineffectual at doing that at this point in time. It doesn't mean they are never going to be able to run decent candidates. You know how much better the world would be if the two major parties in the United States was the Libertarian Party and the Republican Party? They would be such a better world. I want to live in that world, right? But that's not the reality. You're going to have to displace the Democrats in some way, shape, or form, and the only way you're going to be able to do that is by having actual arguments and not catering to the left, because a lot of the people, a lot of independents especially, are leaving the Democrats behind and turning to the Republicans because of the absurd things that the Democrats are saying. So it's like, don't say more absurd shit than the Democrats. Like, can we at least make that a rule?
I mean, I think this speaks into, and I'm thinking of a way to bring this to Masters. I think the advantage masters, the advantage the left always has had up to this point is they have vision, right? Even just the word progressive or progression is a powerful, a positive word. They don't have to define it. They can just say we're moving towards the future, and the future is going to be bright and beautiful, right? That even in the most hazy bullshit language gives them a purpose. It gives them that's a way to mobilize people and get votes and get power. Whereas the right for a long time is what's the vision, like not that, like not progressive, like to put the brakes on things, which I think is needed right now because things have gotten so bad. The issue I have a lot of times with some of these guys running, against DeSantis or against Masters is that, okay, unless you have a better vision, like a really clearly better vision than Masters, which, you either you do or you don't, but let's say in your head you really do, then fine, run against him. But I don't think he does, right, in this case. Or the guy in Florida doesn't have a better vision for Florida or for the country than DeSantis does. So
and then they come back to their argument that we're a political party, so that's what we do is run candidates, except for that this guy had to go outside of his party to get his ballot signatures to get on the ballot to run against Masters. Hector did that completely outside of the Libertarian Party of Florida. Like he did that completely independent of that. It's like, okay, you can't make the argument that we're a political party and this is what we do is run candidates when the political party itself is not the one running the candidate. Like, in fact, party, if you were a strong party, like if a Republican or a Democrat tried to do that, the Republican or Democrat party would step in and shut that down. Like they wouldn't let them do something embarrassing to the party in that type of a manner. So like if it is actually about the party and you are a party that's serious about running candidates and stuff, then you would step in and you would quash these bad candidates when they try to run, or you would quash the candidates that are running in bad positions, like against Masters and against DeSantis, because clearly the alternative to DeSantis or to Masters is way worse. And it's not the Libertarian candidate. It's the Democrat who is a complete shitbag.
Right.
Yeah. And I think that's, it's like you have a lot of people who just want to win. And this has been a big problem in the political process in the West all over the place. It's like people who want to win. And once they win, that's the only incentive. And it's like, well, they don't have a vision for the country. They don't have a way to make it better. They just want to win. And they're like, well, if I win, then things just get better.
If you want to win, set forward a winning argument. Like, that's the thing, is that people like us, like especially you, Justin, and I know you're past Jason, you were never like really libertarian, but Justin and I both come from the libertarian camp. I still operate at the Libertarian Institute because everything that's done at the Institute, I completely agree with, right? I believe in those guys. I may not 100% all the time agree with, an article that's written. There might be like some little, niche in there that I disagree with, but those are my people. Like, I love those guys. Like you're not going to be able to convince me that those guys aren't on the right track. They understand what's going on. The problem is like it's the candidates that are attracted to this, because like we were attracted to libertarianism because it was a better philosophy. It like just purely philosophically, in theory, it is better than anything else that's drawn out for you. And so you're like, okay, this is a better philosophy. Then why can't you find people that can argue that philosophy in pragmatic terms that can run for office, right? It makes you think, like, I believe, like, well, I can't even say I completely believe, but it at least makes me like pause and go, are people saying stupid shit like this? Just like, are they feds? Right? It's like, we can have a friend or Fed episode about this guy, because it's like, you're coming in and you're just throwing the game.
Well, I mean, think about the people that are most well known by just like average, like normie Americans who aren't into politics and don't get deep into third party politics and stuff like that. Like, I could tell you way too much about the Constitution Party and the Green Party and the Libertarian Party and a couple other like little small niche parties that disrupt elections in different places for different reasons, because I'm into that kind of stuff. But like the average just normie American, they don't know shit about the Libertarian Party other than they know that there's some homeless dude with a boot on his head and some fat guy that runs naked across the stage. Like, right. These are the staples.
Was he the guy who ran across the subway naked the other day? Was it the same guy? I'm just curious.
Probably.
And on the, I'll be on the record for saying that I supported Vermin Supreme, at least on Twitter. I was like, this is good because it's a disruption, and I was like, fuck it, let the circus go. Like,
And that's I get this.
Yeah,
I get
but-
the Vermin Supreme shtick. Like that's
Yeah,
for
it's a
people who aren't in
shtick.
on the
It
joke.
is a shtick, though, and that's what I'm saying. You're not, if you want to be taken seriously as a party, you got to lay out like winning arguments. And when you're reading like Rothbard and you're reading Hoppe and you're reading Mises and you're reading these things, you go to the Mises Institute and you're listening to the lectures that are being laid out in front of you. Like, you can't argue against these things. You're like, okay, like this makes sense. But then you see the people that take stage under this banner, and you're like, what do you have in, like, what does this guy talking Age of Consent have in common with Jeff Deist? I want to see Jeff Deist up there. I don't want to see this dude up there. You know what I'm saying?
Well,
And
that's where it kind of comes back to Masters, because Masters is kind of the as you were saying before we got started when we were chatting, like Masters is of the Mises Institute, like
right.
he comes from that kind of a background. He had a very libertarian blog that he did when he was in college in like 2006 or so, 2008, somewhere in that neighborhood, and like wrote about open borders and stuff like that. And as tends to happen, as you get older, you get more conservative, and he started to look at the things that are going on in the country. And so what you get is he is bringing those libertarian ideas and principles and a lot of that background to running in a Republican position, because that's where he's going to have the most influence, and that's where he's bringing the winning arguments is to that spot.
And,
So
we've seen some success with this, like whether it's Thomas Massey or Rand Paul, and who was the guy in Michigan that dropped out? Ended up.
Justin Amash.
Yeah, Amash. Like, we've seen in the Republican Party there be a little bit of that.
wasn't
influence.
Ted Cruz sort of semi-libertarian as well, or at least
I would say Ted Cruz
tipped his hat towards it.
I'd say Ted Cruz is a constitutionalist. Like, I mean, this guy had the Constitution memorized by the time he was 13 years old. Like, he's a very much an advocate of originalism. So like the Supreme Court justices you see would be right along Ted Cruz line, of thought, which, I mean, it's better than progressivism. So
yeah, I think Ted Cruz was originally one of the Tea Party guys, and he was very much a constitutional purist, Constitution Party type, and like, I guess he's not as great as he was at one time. I'm sure Washington makes you squishy over time, but he's still like on the list of senators and people in Congress. He's still better than average for sure.
Trump broke Ted Cruz. Like, Ted Cruz was actually pretty fire prior to running against Donald Trump. And when Donald Trump came out,
Dad was a Zodiac killer.
well, no, he insulted his wife. Like, the whole dad was a Zodiac killer. That was just funny. That was like, I don't think anybody took that really seriously. But when he came out and he insulted Ted Cruz's wife, and then Ted Cruz turned around like a month later and endorsed Donald Trump, it was kind of like, yeah, I can't respect that. Like, I mean, I get where you're coming from, but I don't respect that. Like, I'd be like, there's no way I'd ever endorse that guy. He insulted my wife. If anything, the only thing I endorse is him meeting me outside.
I mean, it would depend on how sick the burn was. I'd be like,
he was calling he basically said she looked like she had Down syndrome or something like that. It was crazy. Yeah, it was like, and he was going hard after Ted Cruz's wife, like talking about her looks and how she was ugly, and it was just, I was like, nah, dude, like, you can't endorse a man after he said that about your wife in front of the entire country.
It's almost as bad as being called a racist and then 3 months later asking that person to be your vice president.
it was a debate. Oh man. Okay, so let's figure out how this all works with Masters and Thiel, and because you have the big three Thiel candidates, right? It's Masters, it's
JD
Vance,
Vance.
and what's the third one? What's the third guy? I always forget. Mark Gates, right? Gates.
Matt Gaetz.
I guess.
Yeah. And I find they're three very interesting figures because individually they kind of cover a lot of different spaces, right? Masters is very kind of hard-nosed, ultra-conservative. The fascist label is easily applied to him in some ways from the new left understanding of fascism. Vance is much more hillbilly.
Vance is that country. Vance is that country folk everyman type of candidate. Even though if you like, he's not really that, but he is the kind of the
he speaks
persona.
Southern.
Yeah,
right?
he's the persona of that.
He speaks hillbilly, and then you have Gates, who's sort of like that. Sort of he's on Twitch and he's new and current and hip
Gates
and
is
whatever,
kind of the
right?
edge. Gates is kind of the edgelordy guy. Like he's the Republican version of what the Mises Caucus is attempting to be, with like being edgy and stuff, like with the New Hampshire Twitter posts and stuff like that. Did you see the video where Gates said something about ugly chicks, and the girl who was interviewing him said, "Don't you think that'll offend people?" And he said, "And." He's like, so.
Yeah, he's like, Matt Gaetz always struck me as kind of like the playboy kind of dumb jock kind of, archetype, and that's kind of what he's playing up to. He was the popular kid in school, and he doesn't know what it's like to ever lose anything. So it's like, all right, whatever. I don't really have anything against the guy. I don't find his style of communication to be the least bit like attractive.
My point here is the thing that connects all three is Peter Thiel, right? So Thiel's massively funding and managing or whatever that's their campaigns.
Thiel was involved in.
Yeah, well, hang on. So, but if you look at them, let's say as investment companies, you take each one of them as almost its own separate enterprise, right? Okay. He's backing three different visions and versions of a new populist message, and I think it's almost to say playing the field and saying which one wins. Maybe all three will win, but which one wins and which one gets the most support, and then it's like then you're going to mediate desire through that model, right? Who's a more powerful model going forward for this more progressive post-Trump Republican Party or Republican message, and then you elevate that one, right? Maybe it's going to be Vance, maybe it's going to be Masters, maybe it'll be Gates. Who knows? Maybe it'll be all three, right? And
where is Vance running? I'm sorry, I know the name, but I don't know where he's running.
I don't know.
Ohio. He's in Ohio.
Ohio. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, and then you have Gates is in Florida, right?
Something like I don't know if
is he in New York? Is he one of the? No, he might be in Florida. I can't remember.
I'll look it up, because like what I'm trying to piece together here is because what you're saying to me right now, it's making me think that what is actually being done is
Florida.
Florida. That's what I thought. Okay, so it appears to me what we're seeing between JD Vance in Ohio, you have Matt Gaetz in Florida, and then you have Blake Masters in Arizona. I think what you're getting regional archetypes, right? So like Florida is kind of like this playboy's paradise, right? Matt Gaetz kind of fits into that persona of the playboy, right? Even with the bad publicity that came out about him and the women, and I know it's all BS, like that was all like found to be a bunch of BS rumors, and there was nothing there. But I know how Ohio is, right? Driving truck, I've been to Ohio several times. I mean, Ohio is just as country as Oklahoma, right? Justin would fit in well in Ohio. Like it would be like no change for him. Those guys are all deer hunters, and that's what they do. And so if you have like kind of the hillbilly type up in Ohio, that speaks their language. Arizona is a little bit of a tougher catch because Arizona doesn't have its own kind of culture thing going on. Arizona is kind of a mishmash of all kinds of things happening all at the same time. You have like the like kind of the Spanish Americans like you would get out in New Mexico. You would have like California rejects that moved to Arizona, like what's his name that had that podcast that Matt was on. I can't think of his name. But
Jason Stapleton.
There you go. Yeah, the California rejects like Stapleton. And then you would have, I have friends that live in Arizona. There's not really a identifiable culture. Like if you went to Oklahoma or Texas or Florida or Ohio, you kind of have this identifiable culture. So Blake Masters is kind of in a position where he's got to play all things to all people, which is kind of an interesting place to be in. And
yeah, but based on the articles too, is that he comes from, I mean, I think he talks country club. If you think that Vance talks hillbilly and Gates talks,
Florida party.
Yeah, no, I did. What I'm saying,
he talks bro.
I'm not insulting the guys. I'm saying what I think is happening is what we're seeing are these archetypes that are being popped up, and they're trying to be the representative of the everyman of that region, for that senator seat. So you get the JD Vance. I think Blake Masters has a lot more on his plate as far as that goes, because there's not like this identifiable culture in Arizona. So it can be very difficult. So I think maybe out of all three of them, Masters may be the one that's most
vulnerable,
being himself and not putting on an act, right? I would think that because it's very hard to narrow down like what is it that the people in Arizona will want. And you see, Kerry Lake is real popular there. And so I think Blake Masters kind of riding that coattail and being in that zone is actually good for him. And just staying as close to the original Blake Masters and being his original self and being authentic is actually a good move for him.
Yeah, and that's like Lewis says, like Masters kind of seems like he's the most genuine. Like when you
genuine. Thank you, sir. That was the word I was trying to say that I couldn't think of.
When you see the things that he's written about and talked about for like since he was in college, when he was, I think he started really getting involved in this stuff when he was like 19 years old, or maybe even younger than that. He's been doing this stuff for a while, and he's been involved with Peter Thiel for a while as well. So like there's been a plan, but yeah, he does seem like the most genuine. Like he talks about the stuff that he talked about in the past, and like how his we've gone through similar changes over the last several years, with some of the post-libertarian ideas of stuff and stuff like that. Like, a lot of us thought in a certain way, and then as we've seen the world kind of devolve and COVID insanity take place and everything that came out of that, and then just the continuous push from the progressive left to take everything to the most insanely radical point that you possibly can. We've also kind of changed our opinions on some stuff. Like when I was never open borders per se, but I was like, maybe we can make this a little less restrictive. Maybe it doesn't have to be, we don't have to have ICE and the Department of Homeland Security running around and throwing people in cages and all this stuff. And I still don't necessarily support the cages, but at the same time, when you look at what's gone on across all of Europe with mass migration of Middle Eastern immigrants and stuff like that, and also same thing is going on in a lot of the big cities here in the United States that are the safe havens or whatever. There's something to be said for the damage that does to a culture and a society. And so maybe we should be a lot more close borders and a lot stricter on immigration. And, maybe maybe that's not a good idea.
I mean,
so,
the only advantage you have from South Americans in general, and I'll say just in general, is they're generally Catholic, right? Like Roman Catholicism was pretty heavily steeped in South and Central America, so that does help a little bit. And if you're going to contrast, let's say, Muslims and Africans going into Europe versus South Americans flooding into the Americas, at least there's a commonality of religious backgrounds or principles, which has always seemed to more or less help with amalgamation over. I mean, historically, now we're living in a secular world, which, I mean, crapshoot that, right? But yeah, I mean, the fundamental problem, and I think this is kind of what's hitting home, and politicians who are winning now are the ones who are pointing out consequence. With Meloni in Italy, and the guys who won in Sweden, and a few other populist right movements in Europe, they're basically just running on consequence, saying these things have happened, these were the policies that were pushed and that we accepted, and now we're living in this, and this is bad, and people can follow that progression to understand that, okay, this is bad, and at least these people are telling the truth about it. This is where Putin has a lot of strength in his speeches, is that it's like, where's the lie? Now, I think Putin's an evil, lying actor. I don't think he's an honest human being. At the same time, he can now say truthful things like the West, because the West has played themselves out to a position where he can easily just go, well, look at this stuff. Like, you did this, and this.
Yep.
And he's not lying, right?
Right.
And that gives him an amazing amount of strength, because people respond to the truth. And we've gotten to a point, the West has gotten to the point where our consequences have caught up to us, and we can't brush it under the rug anymore or wish it away. And even the media can't even cover this stuff up anymore. So it's gotten to a critical mass point where we have to start addressing the effects of liberalism up to this point, of what, 30, 40 years of unrepentant liberalism has, with no counterbalances, led us to this.
Well, and that's where the teal-backed candidates kind of have the upper hand, is they are willing to stand up there with their actual campaign platforms and say the things that the squishy, like, middle of the road, the speed limit conservatives won't say. They're willing to go up there and actually, like, push back against that stuff and bring honesty to their talking points. Nobody wants to hear well, maybe we could just dial back the Department of Homeland Security, and maybe, we'll stop using the cages as much, and we'll start doing these things. Like, no, people who are living in border states that are getting absolutely wrecked by immigrants coming across, just literally by the thousands, they don't want you to talk about reforming the Department of Homeland Security and taking down the cages. They want to know how you're going to actually secure the border and stop this complete devastation that's happening. So you can't be squishy on that stuff. You have to have a strong message. And that's what these guys are doing. Like, it's what the Masters, Vance, Gates, the teal-back candidates, it's what the new right type of approach is taking. Is it has to be bold. You have to actually say things with substance. Otherwise, you're just going to keep getting steamrolled by progressivism. Not because progressivism has any substance, but because they're the loudest and they're the most annoying. And so people are getting bombarded with that consistently. And the more people are bombarded with it, the more they just kind of go with it. So,
well, they're bombarded with it because they have the momentum. I mean, you gotta realize that progressivism has been in charge of the United States political system since the 1920s. So you're not standing up against an idle object. You're standing up against a moving entity that has the momentum on its side, and it's been bulldozing everything in its way for the last 100 years.
Yeah, I think that speaks to your point, Tommy, is that, I think the chief problem with libertarian candidates is libertarian makes a lot of sense if you've read the material, or if you've been introduced to it and you at least have a working knowledge of it. for the average person who has no working knowledge of Mises, who's never read Rothbard, and is not going to, they need a message that is very cut and dry. That's very presentable. They don't want to hear about Econ 101. They want to hear like how are you, inflation's bad, fix that, and go, okay, we're going to do that, right? Like, immigration is destroying my town. Do something with that. Okay, do it, right? They don't need to hear about the NAP. They don't need to hear about your philosophical musings right now. It's like we're at war, and I've said this on the podcast many times, is that there's like peacetime talks and peacetime ideas and wartime ideas, and we're literally in some sort of information existential fifth generation blah blah blah. It was the walls of war, and if you're not taking actual praxis kind of actions, or speaking in a language that people go, okay, brass tacks, do something, then piss about fucking rope. Like I could give a shit about what Rothbard has to say about this. Like what's the existential, what's the libertarian answer to age of consent laws? Fuck you, man. I have to worry about my kid being turned into a zipper chest. Like, no. Like,
yeah.
No,
well,
no.
I love that insult. That is like the best insult that's come out all year. Like,
it's a good, I like using it.
Well, and like as much as I hate to say it, like the war in Syria stuff and the bombing brown kids stuff, like, I get it. That stuff's terrible. The average American voter could not give a single solitary shit about that. They are way more worried about gas is $5.50 a gallon, and I can't afford to put food on the table because my grocery bill this year is double what it was last year. And also, there's a chance I might get laid off from my job because everybody is feeling the pinch, and we don't know how long this is going to be viable.
The proof of that is the media is basically sounding the alarm of thermonuclear war, and everyone's like, look, man, I'd love to care, but I got bills, man. Like, it's like the Armageddon, we might all die. Yeah, okay, cool, but I mean, gas prices, dude.
If we're all dead, then I don't have to pay my bills.
Right? It's like okay, cool. World War III is coming. Until it happens, I still got to make a mortgage payment. Like, what are you doing to help me? Like, not go home.
Have you seen the price of meat lately? Like,
right? Yes, and I'm one of those, because Beatrix she cooks almost everything we eat. Like, I'd say 99.9% of the food we eat in this house, she's cooking. It's very rare she ever asked me to cook anything. And usually it's just like Creole or Cajun, because that's my background, so I can do that more than she can. And so I go to the grocery store. I get off work, I go to the grocery store. I get our food for the night because she wants to decide the day of, this is what we're going to eat tonight. So I go to the grocery store, I pick up whatever she needs. I come home. I've watched just in the last, I came home and started working local in June of 21. Right. So now we're in October of 22. So just over a year I've been home, and I've gone from spending $30 a day at the grocery store to almost $80 a day at the grocery store. Like, that's real. That's a real deal, and I grow things here that I don't have to buy, so I have, different types of vegetables growing. I have eggs. I have my chickens, my ducks. I have a stocked pond in the back. If I want fish, I can go catch fish. Like, so the reality is that this is hurting people. And so when you have people like a Masters or a JD Vance that are able to communicate on the level of the everyday person that is seeing the immigration and how the immigration is affecting them and yada, 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 then that connects, and they're able to connect. And the progressives aren't able to connect, because, as we know, because we've read the Progressive Era by Rothbard, we've studied what was ushered in, that the progressives were always on the side of the corporations, that this isn't just like some turn that happened in the 21st century that the corporations and the progressives got in bed together. No, this has always been a thing. And now it's just in your face, because it's like, what can you do about it? The ties are already so deeply ingrained that how are you going to stop it? And if you try to stop it by voting for a Masters, well, then you're a fascist, because, well, I think because is the wrong word, but what I would say to that is it is empirical on people like Justin, you, Jason, and myself to stay in touch with the details about how creating bubbles does affect the economy and how it affects inflation and how these things happen, and that it is up to us to interpret these laws that come down these from Mises and from Rothbard. And as Jason said, don't expect every person to read Mises and Rothbard. That's not their job. They shouldn't. Like, this is a very niche subject for a very niche people that are willing to take on. And some of the stuff I read, I hate that I'm reading it. I'm like, geez, man, this is a chore. Why am I doing this? Well, I'm doing it because I feel like I have a responsibility. Now, my responsibility ultimately with my podcast is not to the audience, unfortunately. Sorry, audience. I love you people, but it's to my children. I do this as kind of a public record of my thoughts and my kind of journey through these things that interest me. And so when you see these people that pop up like a Masters, and I'm looking at him and I'm going, okay, this guy understands Austrian economics. Like, he's read, Mises, he's read Rothbard. He gets like what the details are of it. I want to hear what his solutions are. And you hear people like Tho Bishop or Jeff Dice come out and say, yeah, this guy's a real deal. Then it's like, all right, you have my attention now. I want you to show me how you're going to move forward. And what the thing that we've always known as we've studied Mises and Rothbard is these ideas are not friendly to government. They are not government friendly. They are undercutting the government's power. They are undercutting the ability for the government to create an oligarchy in which they can push the consumers down the road into their little bubbles and into their pods and eating bugs, right? This is the goal of the Austrian economic school, is to undercut the power and the dynamics of the government. And so when we see a Masters come down and we see all these articles that are attacking him, all these people attacking him, we have to understand that they are attacking the very thing that would make us more sustainable, more free, and more able to take better care of our families.
Yeah, I mean,
you mentioned the corporations.
I mentioned a whole lot there. I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, I wanted to specifically hit on the corporations. Like, that's one of the things that you see come out of the left all the time, is that they are constantly talking about corporate greed and all of this stuff. But at the same time, if you look at who these corporations are donating all of their money to in the elections, it's not Republican candidates.
It's not Ron Paul.
So when you're
talking, Mitt Romney and Barack Obama got all the money, right?
Yeah,
Ron Paul didn't get the money.
Yeah, when you're talking about corporate greed, the people who are decrying how terrible corporate greed are the ones who are benefiting the most from that corporate greed. So, like, that's the kind of stuff that, like, the Masters and the Teals, like, you're seeing, they have to mobilize against them because they're bringing it up. Like, they're bringing that stuff to the forefront. Like, you see where our money's coming from, and now go look where their money's coming from, and that's where it kind of starts to, at least for the more normie type of Democrats, like, they're starting to look at this and say, okay, number one, the woke mob is psychotic, and a lot of just like regular Democrats are finding themselves not aligned with that anymore. And also, the curtain's getting pulled back more and more. Like, Trump, for whatever you think about him, that was something that he did well, was he kind of pulled the curtain back a little by little on a lot of this stuff that's been going on for a very long time. And people are like, oh shit, I never would have thought about that. So there's some interesting dynamics that are getting played out with the way the different sides are approaching this. Jason, you had something you were gonna.
Yeah, I forget what I was going to say, but there's a spin-off to that. Jordan Peterson once had an open question of when does the left go too far, and my personal response to that is when they start targeting children. There's a biological thing that happens to parents. I think anyone who's a half-assed decent parent. I remember an hour after my daughter was born, and they brought her from the delivery room to the bed, to the nursing bed, and I felt my body change. Like I felt a biological change in me where I started checking out my 6s and 9s and realized that if anyone came aggressively towards my wife or my child at that moment, I could take their life. Like, you get that Jack kind of feeling. And when you start to if anyone starts to target my child, or if I feel my child is in danger because of your bullshit policies, now I'm your enemy. And I think that even if you're a dyed-in-the-wool Democrat, blue-pilled, progressive, et cetera, there's still that operating in the back of your head. So even if it's not on the forefront of you, it's somewhere in the back of you, working on you, going, there's alarm bells going off. It's like how anxiety really isn't a problem. It's just telling you that there is a problem. So this is where when they start targeting kids and they start making it, the transgender thing, the puberty blocker thing, the locking kids away for 2 years and keeping them out of school thing, child suicide rates are up, all those things, kids. That's when you lose people completely. And if they can attach you to the problem of their children, you're fucked, in whatever way possible. And I think that's what's happening now with the Democratic Party, is that they've gone that one step, or progressive, whatever, right? The Democrats are just part of that thing. They stepped over that line, and I think with right wingers, we're a bit more aggressive about it because we don't have anything politically to lose on that front. But I think even just to speak to your point, I think even like middle of the road, or let's say not completely drank all the Kool-Aid progressive types are backing out and going, okay, I'm not injecting my kid with five shots of God knows what. I'm not taking my kid out of school for another 2 years, and all that stuff is building up. And it's hard to ignore now. It's on your doorstep. It's in your home. it's fucked up. And I think that's the again, going back to consequences. I think this is 2024 can be really an election of consequence. And I think that's the way. If there's a pathway for right wingers to win, and not just win an election, but start to actually change the whole system and what's operating inside that system, that's the kind of thing they're going to have to keep energizing people on, is that they're coming for your kids. Like this is a war for your children, and that's I think a more powerful message than econ something, or war in Ukraine. So
well, I mean, that's how Youngkin won in Virginia. Like he ran on CRT in schools, and he ran on all of the lockdown stuff, and like that was what was successful. Like you have to be able to tailor your message to hit people where they're already being hit. Like it's politics is a game. It's a game of chess. It's a game of whatever you want to, whatever sports analogy you want to play. But the left has been punching, and the right has spent the last 30 years just trying to block. And now you see like the Masters and these types of candidates, and these are the counter punches. It's time to stop blocking, and it's time to hit back. And you don't do that by being squishy in the middle of the road.
The Trump used to say something whenever he would be talking to his audience, and he would say, "They're not after me; they're after you. Like they want to get me out of the way so that they can get to you, so that they can hurt you." And he was talking to the electors, and the citizens that were coming to his rallies, that it was really about them. And this is something I said to Monica Perez whenever last show I did with her was ESG is not about the corporations. It's about you. It's about controlling you. It's about getting you in line. And, I think after I said that to her, she was like, "Oh shit. Now I see it." You know what I'm saying? But it took somebody pointing it out. Like, it's not about the corporations. It's about you. And then you have this, and I'm not going to go down this ESG rabbit hole because I could do that for hours, as everybody knows. But John Taylor Gatto had told us years ago that the education system was broken, that it was not intended to educate children and to play upon those children's strengths. It was intended to structure those children into a good cog in the wheel for the state, right? And in the Communist Manifesto, one of the major tenets of the Communist Manifesto was taking control of the education system and destroying the families, right? Like, we're witnessing something that is coming to fruition. So whenever you're seeing like a youngkin and you see the revolt of the parents and saying no more of this, the reason they're so insulted, the reason that they throw all the shade at a Blake Masters or a Matt Gaetz or a JD Vance, it's not because of JD Vance or Blake Masters. It's because they're standing there. They're actually representing you. They're actually speaking on your behalf, saying, yeah, we're not going to have this anymore. You're not going to continue to do this. You've been brainwashing and destroying children for 100 years. No more. You're not going to do it. You've crossed the line, right? I don't care if that teacher's boobs in fucking Canada were prosthetic or a novelty. I don't care. It doesn't matter. That person should not be in the classroom with high schoolers. And bravo to all those high school boys that made fun of that dude, because he should have been made fun of. He should have been mocked and ridiculed and thrown out on the streets because he had no place in the classroom teaching children. And so when they're going after Blake Masters and they're going after JD Vance and they're going after Matt Gaetz, they're coming after you. It's because these people are, as Michael Malice so well put, and I don't listen to a whole lot of Michael Malice, but he said it perfectly when he was describing Trump. They thought Trump was the river, but he was the dam, right? And as soon as they got Trump out of the way, the people went crazy, right? And so they're coming after you, and they have to move these people out of the way to get to you. By destroying these people, it's opening them up, especially if they can get you to believe that these people, whether it's a Gaetz or a Vance or a Masters, if they can get you to believe that these people are degenerates in some way, shape, or form, then you will allow them to continue to force their degeneracy onto your children, because they want your kids, and they don't want your kids because they love them. They want your kids because they hate you.
Yeah, I mean, perfectly well put. I mean, and I think that's, if there's anything to run on, and again, that biological impetus that happens with all parents, and I think even the shitty ones, is there's a protectionist vibe. There's something that activates in you, and if you can tap into that, and I mean, we can talk about it almost callously, but I'm not trying to be cynical about it, but because it is a real and present danger. I think about it every damn day. Like it's always on my mind, right? I got a 2-year-old daughter,
Right.
It runs in the back of my head all the freaking time.
Yeah.
And
I have a 3-year-old granddaughter.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what does that mean? Like, what does it mean for her?
Yeah. And if you give me a political candidate in front of me who said, I'm going to make sure that the things that you're worried about don't affect her, I'm going to vote for you. And I don't vote, but right. I'm going to throw support behind you, regardless of anything else you say. Like, I mean, I could look down on every other thing you stand for and go, I disagree with everything else, but you know what? That thing, we're going to go with that, and hope and pray to God that actually works out, because the other option is zipper-chested kids and God knows what else, and psychological terror. So fuck that, you know.
Trey posted this Sam Hyde quote: "When we win, do not forget that these people want you broke, dead, your kids raped and brainwashed, and they think it's funny." I mean, that's
that's a positive message. Thanks, Sam.
But that's it. Like, that's when you start looking at, like, when you look at Masters, and you look at like Maloney in Italy, and what was the guy that ran against Macron in France. There were a number of like populist right candidates in Sweden and Germany. Bolsonaro, is that his name? The guy in
Brazil,
yeah. Like, when you look at these candidates, and all they can do is try to tell you how these are fascists, and you look at what these people actually stand for, what they're saying, what they've been saying for like I looked at Maloney going back to early to mid 90s, and the things she's been doing since she was literally 15 years old. If that's fascism, okay, like I'll be a fascist if that's fascism. Like, if what Blake Masters is selling, if that's fascism, okay, I'll be a fascist. Like, because that is the better alternative. And there are people who are waking up to that, who are looking at it, and who have realized that if you do not completely and perfectly align with everything that the left says to a T, stay in lockstep with them every step of the way, that you will be declared a Nazi or a fascist or the enemy. There are a lot of people who are waking up to that and just saying, all right, well, fuck it then. I'll be a Nazi. If that's what it is, then I'll be a Nazi. I'll be a fascist. I'll be your enemy because you do not represent me.
Right.
All right, boys. I gotta jump out.
Oh
yeah, Jason's got to go. Let's and we're kind of in a good wrapping spot, sort of. So, Jason, you want to give some closing thoughts before you roll out of here?
I mean, we can keep it. I feel like this is just part 2 of a 10-part series, really. Yeah, I mean, we're in very interesting, confusing, dangerous, and hopeful times, all at the same time. In the first part of it, I said, I'm moving away from politics, material politics in general, and moving towards more of an orthodox framework, where all I really want to think and operate in the world is through an orthodox lens. I still think that's overall a positive message for most people. The thing is, it's not operative. So, you got to do what you got to do. But yeah, I think these conversations like this are always important. The foundational thing is that people have got to realize that they're not alone, that they're not crazy. The Kanye thing is telling people, you're not crazy, man. You're seeing things as they are, or you're starting to see things as they are. And one of the things that I think that these kind of conversations can do is create that desire for people that will manifest itself, and saying that, yeah, we need something better than this, because the way this is garbage, and it's not even serving the people that it says that's going to serve the most. So.
Tell me what you got.
man, well, I'm on board with Jason. If somebody's protecting kids, like, all right, you're good with me, man, because I know a lot of people with a lot of young kids. I have a granddaughter. I have 5 children of my own, but they're all grown at this point in time and raising hell as they should be. And because they're in their 20s, and that's what you do when you're 20s, you raise hell. But yeah, if I'm getting a message and somebody, the only thing that I agree with them on is like, yeah, we're going to protect children. I'm like, okay, yeah, it's good with me.
Well, and like you talked about, the reason that you do your show and stuff is for your kids. And that's, I know for Jason, that's a lot of why Jason does his. For me, that's also a lot of reason why I do mine, because then my kids are in the house, not right this second. Typically, though, they're here. Like, a lot of times my son will be sitting in that chair right there, like, listening to me talk about this stuff. And he hears all of it. And for as much of a dumbass as he is, he actually retains some of this stuff. And like, this is stuff that engages him and that he kind of latches onto. That's the same for both of the girls. we talk about this stuff regularly, and they latch onto it, and
Yeah.
and they take it with them. I mean, and they're 12, 13, and 14. They're getting it now. So that's the reason. That's the reason we do this, is so that our kids are empowered to go to their schools and to go to their jobs and to go out in the world and to say, no, this is bullshit. I'm not doing this.
Yeah.
So
For real.
I appreciate both of you and everything y'all do.
Thanks for having me on, man.
Yeah,
I
this
really
has been
appreciate it.
excellent conversation once again. And as Jason said, we could probably turn this into just a revolving series every month or so. But yeah, it's this was really good. I really appreciate it. Appreciate everybody in the chat who was great conversations going on in the chat. Tune in on Tuesday night. I will be talking with Carlos, Jonathan Hemingway, and Trey. And we are going to talk sports and how sports kind of ties into society. So, guys, thanks again. This has been great.
Thanks, man.
Good job, bud.